This week on Back to the Movies, we're talking Juno.
Pay for that pee stick when you're done. Don't think it's yours just because you marked it with your urine.
We're going back to the movies. 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 Hell.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Back to the Movies, the silver screen time machine where my co-host and I travel back to a specific year of cinema history and explore what made it special. This season, we are looking at the year 2007. I'm your host, Ben, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Nat McGee. Nat, how's it going? What are you up to over there?
It's going good. I realized my fan was on, so I sneakily turned it off before I even had to talk, but I was going to just have you wait.
He's giving me like covert military hand signals. He's picking up this weird device. I was expecting him to come in hot with some kind of gag or skit.
No, just the fan was on. This is the little remote.
Dude, it's hot. It's hot today.
It is hot. It's summer, baby. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
I'm so
We kind of skipped spring.
happy.
At least
Aren't
up
you
in
one
these
of those
parts.
people that like hates summer? Don't you hate it with all your...
I'm not fond of summer.
You're like, I'd rather be freezing.
I love fall. I mean, come on, it's beautiful. And you get to wear a light jacket.
The 2 weeks of fall that we have nowadays. This year was great though because of those fires in California. They froze up the landscape and then it got really cold and really folly for like more than a month, which was awesome.
Great.
But at what cost? At what cost? How are you doing, Ben? You were all COVIDed up.
I know. I had my shot on Monday. It was my second shot. It really threw me for a loop. Took me out of the picture for like a whole day. I was just a complete mess. But now I'm immune. Now I'm a superhuman.
Yeah, well, 2 weeks. You got to wait 2 weeks.
2 more weeks.
I also had my COVID shot in the past week, and to be honest, I felt fine. I guess I'm just kind of built different, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Maybe you got a placebo shot. You're part of like a secret test.
Anyway, my God, welcome to Back to the Movies, everybody. We're gonna get into Juno, the classic of our adolescence. Juno.
Cultural phenomenon.
Oh my God. This is a big one, I think. And it's just me and Ben this week. We don't have a female perspective on this one, unfortunately.
Yeah, that was really smart on him.
But I did talk to a couple fans of this film, of the female sex, and they gave me
some
their
of our best
perspectives.
friends are women, so it's okay.
Yeah, so they gave me their thoughts and their experiences with Juno, so I'll try to bring a little bit of that to the table, my research. But before we get into Juno, we'd just like to ask our listeners to please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We have a brand new 5-star review from Jubilee Garage. Jubilee Garage says, I love this podcast. These two dudes really know their stuff, but also have a hilarious dynamic and keep things light and super listenable. It's really fun to revisit some of these old movies with a fresh perspective, whether it's Shrek 3 or some indie foreign film you've never heard of, Ben. Nat and Ben treat each movie with the same level of thorough research and analysis, and there's always great laugh-out-loud moments. Highly reco! So thank you, Jubilee Garage. You can follow us at BttM Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and you can also shoot us an email, bttmpod@gmail.com. So please reach out.
Nat, you watch any good films this week?
I did. I had some guests out for the weekend, and we popped in 2 classics of our childhoods. Stand By Me, Rob Reiner.
Love it.
Stephen King adaptation, one of the best kid movies of all times. And then we followed it up with another kid movie. We watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. One of the best movies ever made. I will accept no arguments. It's a fantastic picture. The songs, I think there's 8 songs. 7 of them are 5-star bangers. One of them I fast forward through every single time.
Which one is that?
Can you guess?
It's been a while since I've seen it. I think I can only remember the good songs.
The song is Cheer Up Charlie. The mom has a little song where she tells Charlie to cheer up.
Literally don't remember it.
It's really boring. Charlie is just like walking down the street while she sings over a vat of laundry. So yeah, Cheer Up Charlie sucks, but that movie has stood the test of time. It's now 50 years old. What about you, Ben? Where did you watch this week?
Didn't have a lot of time for films this week. I did get in one on a late sleepless night. I watched the Frank Pearson made for HBO movie Conspiracy. about the Vonni's conference where the members of the Nazi high command strategize the final solution. It is an absolutely chilling film. It is so frightening and so brilliant. It's got like Kenneth Branagh, Stanley Tucci in it, and Colin Firth.
Is this a new one?
No, it's like from the early 2000s.
Oh, Jesus.
If you want to look at the mechanisms of evil, it's one of the best films for that ever made.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Juno, shall we?
That follows. That tracks.
You know what? I'll allow it, though, because I feel like Juno would be right at home with that whole conversation we just had. She'd be really into it, right?
She probably would.
She would track with this, so I think it's appropriate. Ben, are you a Juno fan? You watch it back in the day?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I certainly saw it in 2007. It had so much buzz and prestige about it. I'm 100% sure it came to the Roxy Theater, the indie theater, and we went and saw it there.
In Vermont.
I remembered liking it quite a bit and then never, ever, ever saw it again or felt compelled to.
Yeah.
And by the time it came around to rewatching for this, all I kind of remembered about it was like the cultural ephemera. I remembered like the lingo, the dialogue, which everyone talked about and quoted and made fun of. I remembered the buzz around it, the Oscar buzz and the film festival buzz, but I didn't really remember the movie at all. And I was really surprised by some of the things that happened in the movie. Where I was like, I didn't even remember that's where it went.
I have a little bit of a different experience. I was very into movies at the time, and my mother, Allison, is an actress, and she's actually a member of SAG, the Screen Actors Guild. So every year she gets to vote on who's a winner in the SAG Awards, the yearly awards that honor actors. And she gets all sorts of, stuff sent to her. And I just remember getting Juno, the DVD, for your consideration. But then we also got, for some reason, we had the screenplay. I don't know why they would send the screenplay to an actor, but I guess just so they could read it to further appreciate it. But like, I was very tuned into like the Oscar campaigning for this movie, because like, this isn't necessarily an Oscar movie. This could very easily be another
Palm Springs
quirky indie comedy. Yeah, Palm Springs,
like
or
one that flies under the radar.
Or even Garden State. Like, it's got its fan base, it's got people that love it, but I think the key to this being such a powerhouse, the original script, of course, and the amazing performance by Elliot Page, but I also think that Little Miss Sunshine just paved the way for this movie to get its best screenplay Oscar. And like, I don't know, I was very aware of it at the time. I was like, these people are pulling a fast one on us. Like, they're skyrocketing this goddamn movie into the Oscars, which like I didn't really have a problem with, but I don't know. It kind of annoyed the movie is kind of annoying. It's kind of an annoying movie.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's weird that legacy outlived the actual details of the film itself.
Yeah, exactly.
The conversation around it was louder than the film.
Yeah. And it was like one of the first times I was really aware of like, oh, they're really like positioning this movie to be like a certain type of movie. Yeah. But in terms of my personal thoughts on the movie, like I remember seeing it a couple times on that DVD and like liking it. My mom, the SAG member, hates this movie. It's like her least favorite movie of all time. She hates it, and I'll get into the reasons why, but I feel like I have to represent for her because she used to like rant and rave about this movie. She really dislikes it. And watching it this time around, I was pleasantly charmed by what the movie does and what it has, but I also kind of agree with some of the critiques that my mom had back then. I think that this movie, it's got some problems, but I don't know. It's weird that it changes when it gets like elevated the way that it does to like being the best screenplay. Like, and
if this had been a film that flew under the radar and had
right,
a cult
exactly,
audience, probably wouldn't make those criticisms at all.
So I'm gonna try to wear two hats on this episode. I'm gonna be like the happy-go-lucky person who's just looking at this movie for what it actually is, and then I'm also gonna be the political firebrand a little bit.
Sure. I mean, we definitely have to acknowledge it as we get into the film that this movie stirred up a lot of political controversy.
For the pregnancy, abortion reasons?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, you got a couple movies in 2007 that are all pregnancy movies. You got Waitress, which we talked about, this one, and Knocked Up. It's like the year
All come out in the same year of the unwanted pregnancy.
It's a weird coincidence because those three movies are all they're all comedies, but they're all very different.
Very different.
I'd say that Juno and Waitress are way more similar than Knocked Up. They're both, we talked a little bit about it on our Waitress episode, but they're both kind of that corporate indie aesthetic that I was trying to define on that episode.
That's very heightened, slightly twee, although I don't think twee is really the right word for it because it's not quite as buttoned up as I think twee normally is.
Yeah, and the banging soundtrack, the fun dialogue, the adult themes, and then Knocked Up is just Apatow gone mad with power.
At his Apatowiest.
Yeah, but did I like Juno? Yes, I liked Juno. It was good. It was good.
Great, good. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah.
Let's get into the story minute. You got a name for it this time?
I was struggling to come up with something. The best I could come up with was rhymes with Juno.
Jesus,
I think
that's so bad.
It's a
You want to do something with like the funny dialogue and the funny nicknames?
I guess so. Like home-skillet, surprise.
That's literally the only one I can think of.
Yeah.
Whenever I try to quote Juno. They ain't no Etch-a-Sketch.
That ain't no. This is one plot summary that can't be untold. Home-skitty.
Great. That's it right there. Perfect. In this segment, Nat has 60 seconds to recount the plot of Juno, and he will start in 3.
Wait, do you have a challenge round? Because this is one I actually feel like I could do a challenge round for, because it's pretty easy. One time you made me name 6 different Transformers.
Yeah, that felt like a good challenge. What's hard? What's something that's an interesting detail that we would want to highlight in this movie? I want you to structure it around the 4 seasons.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Is that too hard?
No, that's good.
Okay.
I'm ready.
On the count of 3. 3, 2, 1, go.
So in autumn, Juno McGuff, a 16-year-old girl, gets pregnant with the baby of Michael Cera. And throughout the winter, she realizes that she's not going to get an abortion. She's going to keep the kid, and she's going to put it up for adoption. And she meets a wonderful yuppie couple played by Jennifer Garner and Jason Bateman, who are more than happy to take the kid off of her hands. So then she gets more and more pregnant. There's some difficulties between her and Michael Cera. And then there's some real difficulties between the yuppie couple. Bateman turns out to be kind of a creep, and they break up. In the spring, Juno gives birth to the baby, and she gives it to just Jennifer Garner, no Bateman. And in the summer, Juno is back with Michael Cera, and all is well in the world. The end.
Very good.
So there you go. That's Juno. There's also like some parents. Juno's parents are there, but they don't really matter.
It's a pretty plot light movie. It's very episodic. The most of the scenes kind of stand on their own and are only connected by the trajectory of Juno's pregnancy.
Yeah, there's like 7 main characters, so it's pretty easy to keep track of it all.
Can we talk book report? Can we get into the context, the meat of this film? If you're going to talk about Juno, there's one person you have to talk about above all, and that's Diablo Cody.
Yeah, Diablo. Have you watched any of her other films?
Yeah, I've seen Jennifer's Body. I actually like that movie a fair amount.
Okay.
That movie kind of got hated on at the time. I didn't get to see, what was it, Tully? Although I thought that looked pretty good.
Yeah, that was also Jason Reitman, the director of Juno. Yeah. They've worked together quite a few times.
She's got a couple others as well.
Diablo Cody had the story of a lifetime, again, in this Oscar season. The story was kind of sold to the Oscar voters.
I've never seen a screenwriter become that famous that quickly. Like, screenwriters are usually not well known. They don't become celebrities in their own right unless they take on other responsibilities as well. But Juno was sold on Diablo Cody as much as anything.
So how did that work?
The whole reason that happens is because she had made a name for herself prior to the movie as a blogger.
Oh,
she was one of the earliest bloggers to find major success. And she did it largely by becoming a stripper and then blogging about being a stripper, which she then turned into a very successful book. And that led to her getting in touch with film producers who were like, hey, you want to write a screenplay?
Wow. It would be interesting to read some of her blogs and see if it's like a similar style of speech and language. Like, did she come up with funny things that didn't actually exist in as phrases, like weird, like new phrases that no one's ever heard before. Because that's what Juno is, especially like the first 20 minutes of Juno. It's like an onslaught of these insane phrases you've never heard in your life that are just so confidently portrayed that you like just almost buy it.
I guess that's a thing.
Yeah.
The one thing she has she's a great anecdote teller. Clearly you can see it from the movie in the way that like scenes do stand on their own and are usually like really maximized. There's no wasted scenes. There's very little connective tissue. Everything is a story worth telling. And I think that's a lot of what her blog was too. You know, it was like recounting the crazy things that would happen to her as a stripper. She wouldn't tell the boring stuff. She would tell the great juicy stories that came out of it.
Yeah.
But it's a real 21st century success story. She literally wrote the screenplay for Juno in a Starbucks.
But also after she had already gotten a deal, right? Like she was told like, go write a screenplay.
Right. She met this film producer, became like her literary manager and is like, you should write a screenplay, send me some samples. And she's sitting in a Starbucks and writes this over the course of a few weeks.
Should we talk about Jason Reitman, the director?
Yeah, he's the other major authorial voice behind the picture. You know, Cody certainly got a lot of the attention, but it was a big coming out for Reitman as well. Jason Reitman is the son of the legendary film director Ivan Reitman of Ghostbusters and Meatballs and Kindergarten Cop and all kinds of stuff.
Didn't Jason like hang out on sets? He was like born into this business.
Yeah. He literally grew up on the sets of films like Ghostbusters and Kindergarten Cop, like in the late 80s and 90s.
That's pretty cool.
He didn't study to be a filmmaker, but he kind of fell into it as he left school. And in 2005, he released his first feature, a movie called Thank You for Smoking, which was a pretty big critical hit, but did not make any money.
Do you like that movie?
I do like that movie. I mean, I can't not like that movie because it has one of the best representations of Vermont in any movie ever. And in my opinion, the single greatest line of dialogue in any film ever, when William H. Macy says, "The great state of Vermont will not apologize for its cheese, sir."
So on brand, Ben. It's gotta mention Vermont.
Yeah, but I like the movie. I think it's dry and funny. I like Aaron Eckhart in it. I like William H. Macy. I wouldn't call it like, you know, an all-timer, but I would definitely a 6 or a 7 out of 10, you know, above average.
Yeah, it's a confident debut for a feature film. It's funny that he followed it up with this because it's such a different vibe.
That movie's so cynical. It revels so much in Eckhart's excesses, and this movie is so wholesome in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's almost like he like got too close to being like overly cynical, and he was like, I gotta dial this back a little bit. Because like Juno is a pretty cynical character, but the world around Juno is not. It's a pretty nice world. And
the movie's about her kind of losing some of her performative cynicism.
Right.
About, you know, accepting that emotionality is a good thing to have, that it makes you happier and healthier as a person.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so this was a big get for him because he was not a name and this script was hot. People were really interested in this project.
Wow.
But he manages to get on board and this leads to a very successful career for him.
Yeah, he's doing a new Ghostbusters, right?
Yes, he is. Afterlife.
I'm sure it'll be great. I'll be there midnight opening.
Hey, you know what? I like Ghostbusters. Give it a try. Whatever. I know it's like a whole political thing because of the female Ghostbusters and how toxic the discourse became around
that. Was the worst moment in movie history ever when like everyone reacted to that movie. It was so ugly.
The less we can say about that, the better. And I'm sorry that all the Ghostbusters are now caught up in that maelstrom of negativity. But I'm always down for Ghostbusters. Give me more Ghostbusters.
All right, let's get into Juno. That was the fastest Ben's Book Report corner ever. I love it.
I felt like you were keeping me on task. You're like, okay, now talk about Jason Reitman.
This is such like a corporate product to me. Like it was like she was a hot writer. She had a script in development that everyone was hot for. Jason Reitman, hot off his Thank You for Smoking movie, perfect fit. Like there's not like much like struggle behind the making of this specific movie.
Yeah, and also these guys just haven't done anything yet. You know, there's not a lot to unpack.
It's their first.
People don't really know who they are. They're unknown quantities. And the interesting stuff, you know, about like Cody, about her background, you can recap pretty quickly.
Yeah. So let's get into the movie. What's your opinion on the overall like vibe of this movie? Do you think it's a little annoying? Or do you like what it's doing? Is it like a nice warm blanket or is it like an irritating iPod song?
Vibe's an interesting way to put it because there are some elements of this film that, to my opinion, clash a little bit. The cinematography and the pace of the editing, directorial style are all pretty mellow. You know, we see a lot of kind of the grayness of this Wisconsin setting. We get
it's Minnesota.
Minnesota. Sorry, Minnesota.
I had to call that out because Jesse was saying that this is not an authentic Minnesota movie. It does not feel like specifically Minnesota. It's more just generic Midwest, but they say it's Minnesota.
That is where Diablo Cody's from. And
Sorry,
where she wrote the screenplay.
I just had to correct.
That's fair. I mean, you got to pull on your expertise. Yeah, and you know, there's a certain mellowness to that doesn't really match Cody's writing style, particularly in the dialogue, which is really rat-a-tat and really heightened. So this movie's vibe for me is actually kind of like a pretty mellow vibe that I can get on board with. That said, early on, there are a few scenes that do kind of grate on me a little bit, particularly the Rainn Wilson scene.
Well, that's how we start. So we start up with Juno with her big old bottle of Sunny D, and she walks over to the convenience store in to me, a pretty obnoxious display of opening credits. These
rotoscoped animations.
The ridiculous rotoscoped animations with the song, which it was a catchy song, but it's just so indie.
It's
so
very
hipster.
Indie movie, yeah.
And she walks into this convenience store and has this bit of dialogue with Rainn Wilson playing the convenience store manager. And it is aggressively written. Just
what a great way of putting that.
The way that they talk is really, really aggressively indie.
People talk about the dialogue in this film. They made fun of it a fair amount at the time, and I think they still do. To my mind, there's really only two scenes where it is over the top. It's this scene and the first phone call between Juno and her friend.
Yeah, when she says honest to blog.
Yes.
Yeah, which are both in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
A lot of the other scenes are very functional and practical. The character dialogue is written well. It isn't obnoxious. It's just these ones where it gets really dialect heavy, for lack of a better term.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. No, like all the scenes with like J.K. Simmons and Allison Janney, and even the scenes with like Michael Cera, like
they're
it's really just those three characters. Juno, Olivia Thirlby, and Rainn Wilson. And Rainn Wilson, it's just I can't with that guy. I can't in this film he's at the height of Office fame.
You know, we haven't talked about that enough. The Office debuts in 2005. We are in an Office world in 2007. I guess the show doesn't really hit the stratosphere until like season 4 and 5.
But you knew who this guy was.
People know about The Office.
They knew that this was Dwight. When this movie came out, it was like, oh, there's Dwight. Like, it was popular enough. And then, you know, the other connection is Arrested Development with Bateman and Sarah. I feel like it's two sides of the same coin where it's like you have your Rainn Wilson for everyone watching The Office, but then you also have the cool indie kids that are like Arrested Development.
Actually, there's a show that's about to get canceled. Already was canceled?
It was just canceled. It was just canceled in 2006. So yeah, it's Rainn Wilson. It's the Rainn Wilson show. He says it's not an Etch-a-Sketch. This is one doodle that can't be undid, home-skillet. And, you know, it is what it is. If you're into that, I am fine with that. And
that's like, whoa, Diablo, back off. You're coming on a little too hot right now.
But honestly, like, I do think that she's announcing her voice a little bit. She's like, I'm not going to just play by the rules of every other version of this movie that you've seen. And I respect that.
One of the strengths of this screenplay in particular is that every scene is maximized. I think I already said that. Honestly, my brain's still a little bit foggy post-shot. But she doesn't waste any space. She always looks to find the core of what makes a moment interesting and doesn't accept anything less than the most interesting choice. And sometimes that comes across as being a little bit much, as being forced, as being, you know, obnoxious. But most of the time, it makes this movie feel a lot more exciting than really it should be for a movie with very little plot about a pregnancy where nothing goes wrong.
Yeah, it's funny about the 3/4 mark. I was like, what is even happening in this movie? Like, Juno's just sitting by the side of a road. Like, so little happens in this movie compared to like even Knocked Up or Waitress, where there was so much more just general drama between the characters and like, is she gonna leave? Is she gonna escape from the husband?
The stakes
like,
are so much higher in that movie.
So much more happens. And in this movie, it's really just boils down to like, is Bateman ready to be a father? And
how much of a creep is Bateman?
Yeah, exactly. And like, that's it.
Will Michael Cera and Elliot Page get together?
So yeah, but it is impressive in that regard. And also, I think that starting off this aggressively is a positive point for the Oscar contention, where you get this screener for this Juno movie and you pop it into your DVD player and it's just different. The first 5 minutes is written differently.
And people overemphasize the importance of dialogue when it comes to screenplays, but I mean, there's no denying that that's the thing you notice.
Yeah, it is. And you're right, though. It mercifully lets up. If the whole movie was like this, like if her dad was talking like that, I wouldn't be able to go the distance with it, I don't think.
After our scene with Rainn Wilson, where we confirm that, yes, Juno is pregnant, we learn a little bit about how it happened. We meet Michael Cera, and we get into the sort of the first chunk of the movie, which is the question of what is Juno going to do? Is she going to get an abortion? Is she going to put the baby up for adoption?
Well, here's the other funny thing that I wanted to mention in the Michael Cera scene is like that indie sensibility that Juno just has to move the chair and rug to Michael Cera's house. The one
she's always got a pipe.
Well, the pipe I get, like she's just holding a pipe. That's fine. But she calls Olivia Thirlby and they move the living room set or whatever that they had conceived the child on to his front lawn. And again, it's just like...
No, it's a different chair. They specify that.
I thought it was the same chair.
No,
I thought that was the whole point.
That's like, she says like this is some woman's bed, like living room set that she just put out on the lawn. Different chair.
Oh, okay. I thought the whole point was it was the same chair and she's like making some kind of a statement. Like she's telling him she's pregnant in the same chair that they did it in. Is that not the case?
No. She just thought it was funny to move the thing there and sit there because she's quirky and weird.
Because it looks like a chair. I don't know, Ben. I think we need to rewind. You can
rewind.
Check.
She specifies that it's like some other woman's chair. It's not the chair in his room, which is
but
where
it
they
is
had sex.
To remind him of the conception, right?
Maybe
because they cut back and forth between the moment.
They do, and she does make the verbal connection. She's like, it started with a chair,
right? Okay. All right. We should get Diablo Cody on here.
But I think it's more like she just saw that chair. And then she's like, that chair's funny.
Interesting. Okay, listeners, please email BttM pod to settle the score.
How much longer can we debate the chair is the really important question.
Well, because I thought it was this really indie, quirky thing. Either way, it's very indie to set up a chair like that on a front lawn. And it's just telling you, Juno is different. She's cool and quirky and does crazy stuff like this and fills a mailbox full of Tic Tacs.
What do we think about the Juno character, and what do we think about Elliot Page's performance?
I think Elliot Page is very watchable. He does a great job just like keeping the movie alive. Juno just becomes this iconic character like during the duration of the movie, which is really cool. Like you just kind of feel happy. You're like, oh, there's Juno. She's walking down the hallway at school and
in her
she's
low
got
tops and her
such cool
plaid
style.
Shirt.
Yeah, and Elliot Page is doing most of that, I think.
Yeah.
There's just this aura of cool 17-year-old.
And the scenes, the emotional scenes, the ones where it really matters.
And the emotional scenes.
He's incredible.
When he gets a little vulnerable, it's really, really well done. In terms of Juno as a person / character, am I wrong in thinking like it's a little underdeveloped, like whatever's going on under the hood, like it's all show and less substance than we might want from a character like this?
We don't get a huge sense of why she is the way she is. She comes from a broken family, right? Her parents got divorced.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like performative elements to her personality that are like deliberately constructed.
Right.
The pipe.
Yeah, and maybe that's just the way she is, and so
we don't get a sense of why, and that maybe would have been more rewarding, particularly since so many of those elements are so quirky or are almost obnoxiously quirky.
Yeah,
you kind of like them to be justified. Although, you know, the movie does go out of its way to justify some of the quirky things pretty well. In that opening shot, she's standing there with a jug of Sunny D, and you're like, is she just like a person who carries around a jug of Sunny D everywhere? And then we immediately learn, no, it's because she wants to take her third pregnancy test in one day, in one morning. And so she's trying to drink so much liquid she has to pee again. Like, the movie does justify it.
And there's also some weird things that she does that are questionable, and maybe there's more going on the surface, like driving out to Bateman's house, which they say is like an hour away from where she lives, multiple times as if it's like no big deal.
Yeah.
Like,
and other people are like, hey, that is a big deal.
Yeah, there's something weird going on there.
Yeah.
But so maybe she wants to impress Bateman. I don't know. Maybe she's confused. Here's my thing is like, I think that I prefer my teenagers and teenage movies to be like a little more realistically awkward, and she just is too cool for school in this movie, and it's the whole point. I understand it's the whole point, and that's totally fine. It's just I'm gonna have a much more relatable time if there's like more cringe going on, because that's just real. That's the real.
Hey, speaking of cringe, what about Michael Cera though?
You know, he's not as cringe. You know, he's got this in Superbad. He's way cooler in this. In an indie way than he is in Superbad. Like, Superbad is way more realistic. And I think in this one, she says it in the movie. Juno says, "You don't even try." And he's like, "I try really hard." Like, and I get the appeal of Bleecker. I think he's pretty cool for a guy in Michael Cera's skin. I don't know. I'm kind of
Sure.
into it. But yeah,
it really
he's
was
king
the
of
year of
awkward.
Sarah. He was having quite a time in 2007.
Yeah, he's coming off that Arrested Development fan base. But yeah, he does a good job. He's a little underused in this movie. He's not in it that much, as I remember. Considering he's on the cover with her, it's way more about her and Bateman, her and her dad.
He drops out for a big chunk of the second act, which then kind of becomes a problem when the movie wants to make Juno and Bleeker's relationship so critical to its climax, because it doesn't. We see him in the beginning, and then he's gone until the tension in their relationship starts, basically.
Yeah, you don't really get the sense that they're in love. You know? You get the sense that they're really good friends and that they have a good time together, but there is a little bit of something missing there where you're like, they're in love, like they need to be together by the end of this movie. I could easily see him just kind of disappearing at the end.
And I don't think that's on the performances. That feels like more of a structural problem with the screenplay and sort of its episodic nature, where it just doesn't want to track that relationship when it isn't being interesting.
Speaking of love, I love Olivia Thirlby. She's the best. She's just, you know, she's a babe. She is the best friend in this movie. She was also in The Whackness, which is a pretty bad coming of age movie from 2008, but it has her in it and she's really good in it.
She's in Dread, which is a total
Dread.
ripoff of Raid, but I love it. It's fucking awesome.
And she does her thing in this movie. She's got no soul other than being Juno's best friend and having an attraction to the math teacher.
The great thing about this relationship is it's so rare to see a female relationship presented where there is no conflict or drama, where the characters just exist to support each other and be friends. You see that all the time in male-to-male relationships in movies, and you almost never see it in female-to-female relationships. And it's so wonderful. Like, there's no time spent to explain why they're friends, what the nature of their relationship is. They're just really good friends, and it works.
Yeah, and it's funny because she's like a cheerleader in this movie, right?
Right.
But she's into Juno, which I think is cool. It's kind of indicative of a new era of teen comedy where you're not just going to be doing the classic like jocks versus nerds versus weirdos, the Breakfast Club way of doing things. And I think you've seen that more and more in more teen comedies. Like, did you see Booksmart? Like, that was all about how the nerds are hanging out with the jocks and they're all the same kind of thing.
Those lines are a lot blurrier than they used to be.
Right, exactly. So maybe this is like a coming of a sensing of the tide changing, which is kind of cool.
After we meet all these characters, Juno goes to try and have an abortion, is freaked out at the abortion clinic, runs into another student there protesting.
That is a great scene. That student killed it. Great
So good.
single scene performance. Way better than Rainn Wilson, just hamming it up. That girl
Yeah,
owned
for
it.
the one-scene performances. she probably has the best one. Who else has like a one-scene performance? The lawyer? That's not very interesting.
The stupid OBGYN technician or whatever that
too
they
quirky.
yell at. The one who's
I
just
thought
a
you were
bitch
talking
to
about the
them.
one at the clinic, but you're right, the OBGYN.
Or the nurse practitioner or whatever that makes fun of them for being poor, basically. The stink eye girl, that's kind of iconic when they just pan over to the stink eye girl.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she decides not to get an abortion, and she goes home, and she has to find adoptive parents, and they say that there are adoptive parents in the Penny Savers, the coupon book, which is insane. I doubt that exists.
Great detail, though. I like it when they're reading the different profiles and trying to decide who they want to adopt the kid.
If this movie had come out a year later, that would have been an internet scene.
Right.
But it's still 2007. You can still barely get away.
You can barely get away with it being
looking through some kind of periodical. And they find Bateman and Gardner. And they set it up without telling the parents, and then they finally tell the parents.
What a great scene that is.
Yeah, that's a standout scene. And Jackie, our devoted fan and art purveyor for this podcast, was harping on just how well written this scene is, because like she said, like she's either been in or could imagine being in the exact same scenario, and like her parents reacting a similar way. It's like really realistic.
Everything is so well tuned, from the blocking to the way the camera isolates characters or groups them together at certain times. There's so much happening in performance as well. A lot of great looks between Simmons and Page that speaks so much to their relationship and to what they were expecting from this conversation, what they're failing to get. I mean, it's four great actors, two Titan character actors in J.K. Simmons and Allison Janney, and two very exciting up-and-comers in Page and Thirlby. And it's a great scene.
I just realized I said Jackie in a similar situation to this. I don't mean to imply that Jackie had to tell her parents she was pregnant at 16. I am not saying that. It just meant any sort of bad vibe situation.
When you have to tell your parents something you know that they are
sorry,
going to be upset
Jackie.
to hear.
No one's listening.
Dude, I've
anyway.
had this conversation. We can get real for a second. I had to, at one point in my life, sit down with my parents and tell them I was an atheist. My parents are very religious.
I thought you were just about to say that you were
I was
gotten a girl pregnant. And I was supposed to be like,
no,
what?
I had to tell them that I didn't want to continue going to church and that I didn't believe in God. And yeah, that's, this is very much that scene where it's like an attempt at understanding, but also a sense of disappointment, a lack of empathy, a feeling of betrayal. All of that stuff felt true.
Yeah. And they just, J.K. Simmons, Allison Janney, they're the best. You can't really do much better than them for supporting characters.
God, and they're both so good in this movie. J.K. Simmons said, like, when he read the script, that he was like, I would take any part in this movie. I would be the teacher with one line of dialogue in this movie. I love the script so much.
Maybe he should have been the fucking convenience store clerk. So they do it. They're down, and they have this awkward meeting with the Lorings. This is my mom's big criticism of this movie. She hates the Lorings equally. She hates both Jason Bateman and Jennifer Gardner. She hates their McMansion. She hates Jennifer Gardner being a control freak. She obviously hates Bateman being a weirdo creep. But I think most of all, she hates that the McGuffs have like a 5-year-old daughter, yet they feel that they must give away the new baby to the Lorings of all people, and that it somehow equates like wealth to ability to care for another child.
Interesting.
She hates that, and that is like the biggest reason she's railed on this movie for years and years, and just like that it's very like classist, and like literally the only reason they want the Lorings is because they have the appearance of wealth, even though, the movie seems to imply that Gardner is ready to have a kid. Bateman isn't.
Yeah, it tries to make that argument.
Yeah, and my mom is like, she's not fucking ready to have a kid. She's going to ruin that child's life.
She does seem like she's going to be a really intense mom.
Yeah.
I will say that's a really interesting argument. I don't know that I agree with it wholesale. Because one, Juno makes the decision to put the child up for adoption before she tells her parents. She's already made that decision irregardless of financial situation.
Right.
She doesn't want to put that burden on her dad and her stepmom. This is the choice that she's made. And I also think that the film is very conscious of the class conflict between these two families.
Absolutely.
And the Lorings come out the worst for it. The movie is clearly not on the side of wealth.
No.
That it's made their relationship, which presumably at some time was something beautiful, into something pretty toxic by the time it falls apart.
Well, it's either the wealth or just the trappings of adulthood.
Success.
And
adulthood.
success. Yeah, like, clearly Bateman is not into it anymore. Like, he wants to keep being younger.
Definitely. And I honestly, as a person who's very young at heart, I'm on Bateman's side early on in the film, right? When you see how controlling Garner is and how this idea that, here's a guy who makes his money as a musician and he can only have his instruments in one room of the house. Like, what the fuck is that?
And also, one room of the most shitty McMansion of all time. Just, bad taste McMansion.
But it's clearly a bait and switch.
Right.
The movie wants you to feel that way. It wants you to like Bateman and be put off by Garner. And then it wants to pull the reverse by the end. And it certainly does a great job of vilifying Bateman. I don't know if it does quite enough for Garner's character. We get a scene of her in the mall that's seen from far away, but that's not it.
To me and my mom both, and maybe my mom has just poisoned me on this at this point, my 17-year-old brain, but she is mommy dearest status. She is gonna just be a helicopter parent, and all she cares about is being a mother, and she's not gonna actually care about the child itself, as an individual. And what's really off-putting is it seems like she just has nothing else other than wanting this kid. But it's also the way the movie presents it. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot missing. And part of it is that it doesn't want you to like this character early on. So it focuses on her negative qualities.
Yeah.
And part of it is that the movie isn't about them. So it can't spend that much time on the Lorings.
But it weirdly is about them to a big degree.
It is about them a lot.
Because all that happens is Juno changes a little. Juno just basically gets a little more knowledge by the end of this movie. She goes through this experience. She comes of age. She but not in any dramatic fashion other than, the pregnancy. But the pregnancy doesn't have much to do with it. It's more the bleaker relationship that she gets through, and then that realization of, oh shit, Bateman is kind of creeping on me. She learns a little bit about herself and also about men and how weird they can be.
The nature of adult relationships. And
right. So, but we got to backtrack a little bit to meeting the Lorings. Like you said, they really try hard to make Jason Bateman this kind of cool guy. He's on the same wavelength as Juno. They know the same bands. They end up upstairs together when Juno's kind of snooping around, and they end up playing guitar together,
doing a little jam session.
Watching it this time around, I was like, yo, the lawyer is downstairs.
She gets paid by the minute.
Billable hours, dude. So I completely sympathize with Jennifer Garner there, because they're sitting all down with the lawyer and they hear them start jamming, and that is, as now a 31-year-old man, I'm like, yo, that must have cost $80, that little jam session. So it's pretty bad. Mark against Bateman.
I think Bateman is really good in this movie. I think this is one of his best performances.
Yeah, he's playing someone different. He gets typecast a lot as the Marty
This
Bird.
becomes his trademark character. Is
really?
the creep. Yeah, it's the yuppie creep.
I thought his trademark character is the Bluth. The Bluth.
That's what he's known
Marty.
for before this, but in movies he's always this guy. This is the guy that he winds up playing.
Interesting. Well, but he also has all those starring roles, right? Game Night. He's the leading man. Which movies are you talking about here?
Okay, let me pull up. I didn't do
the one that I remember. The one that I remember was Smokin' Aces. Did you ever see that? The Joe Carnahan movie. He plays a lawyer that's a depraved sex addict, and he's got really bad sores all over his mouth, and there's a bunny suit in the hotel room that he's staying in, and it's really funny.
All right, so before this, during the era of Arrested Development, he's got things like Starsky and Hutch and Dodgeball, where he's playing really big, colorful cameo characters.
Yeah, right.
They're really silly. Then he's got things like The Breakup. He's kind of a creep in that one.
Okay.
The X, he's playing the clingy ex of the romantic pairing of Zach Braff and Amanda Peet.
Oh, okay.
Smoking Aces, you already mentioned. He's in The Kingdom along with Jennifer Garner singing.
I guess I only thought of him as Arrested Development guy.
Some of this comes later.
Also, to be fair, Marty Bird is a huge creep in certain ways. So I guess
the big
it
one
does apply.
is The Gift, I guess, is actually what I'm thinking of from like 2015.
Okay.
Where he basically is playing another version of this exact character. But he's done it more than once.
To me at this time, he was George Bluth, or whatever his name is. George Bluth.
Who is
Jr.?
kind of a yuppie creep.
Kind of, but you
just don't realize how much of a creep he is until later in the show.
Right, that is true. But in this one, he's a little bit more of like a hipster yuppie creep. He like thinks he's cool, and
he has a little Arrested Development, you could say.
A little bit, yeah. He does. Their conversations about bands and stuff, it's so weird. You know, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, anytime an adult talks to a teenager, it's weird.
Yeah.
But there's like very clear sexual romantic tension between the two of them, like from the get-go. And I think they're both kind of playing into that to make it more awkward.
Yeah. And it escalates. Like she draws out this part of him, of Mark.
Right.
Loring. He likes the way he feels around her, and he conflates that with, you know, a sexual or romantic desire for her. And it just like implodes in on itself. And Bateman's just so good at tracking that whole arc. That final scene is just, it's so incredible between Elliot and Bateman.
And it's also great that it never goes over the top fully. It's sort of like the Jaws effect, where it's like, because you're not seeing the monster, it's almost worse in a way. Like if he just randomly started trying to kiss Juno and Juno's like, ew, get off of me. It wouldn't hit as hard as him.
The closest he gets is saying, how do you think of me? That line of dialogue is the most anyone ever acknowledges it, but it's enough.
And they like touch and stuff. It's kind of weird. And he's like, I'm going to get an apartment in the city. So yeah, we're kind of mixing and matching everything from this movie, but the movie kind of works like that. It's you're able to kind of jump around the plot because it's so
loose,
unstructured.
And you got to talk about Bateman's performance. You have to talk about the full arc of it. I think the same is true of Garner. The thing to note about Garner that I feel like is hard to remember today is she is by far the biggest star in this movie when this movie comes out. She's a major box office draw in 2007.
Which is funny because I don't know if I ever saw a Jennifer Garner movie before this one.
You didn't see Daredevil?
No. Well, maybe I did on like HBO.
You didn't see The Kingdom, a 2007 movie that we're skipping that also had Bateman in it, but Garner was the female lead?
That looked bad.
It is bad. I don't like it.
Yeah,
it's a movie that's pro the war on terror.
Oh, maybe we should cover that one. Fuck. Yeah, no, I didn't really know her that well. Other than was she with Ben Affleck at one point? IRL? I can't remember.
I don't follow that enough to know IRL, but they were in Daredevil together.
They were in Daredevil. That might have been enough to make me think they were together.
What I like about Garner's career arc is that, you know, she starts as an action star. Her big break is Alias on TV, you know, which we talked about with J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
And this is her beginning a transition into a less action-oriented part of her career, but she also has kids around this time, which is part of the reason that she steps away. She's from everything I've heard, like a very devoted and caring parent, and the kids come first before the work.
Got it. So yeah, I don't know. This character just kind of bothers me, but it is what it is. I may have been just campaigned by my mom, but
she's missing a scene.
Maybe that's what it is. That scene with the paint is just too much for me. That she's being that anal about what color paint, because the paint is so similar. If it was blue and pink, or if it was purple and yellow, I'd be like, okay, that's a fair question. But
it's try to play it as a joke, but when you know so little about this character, you're like, you're a fucking psycho,
right? And like, I don't know, maybe there's just in a bad marriage, so it just makes it that much worse that he's like not into that kind of thing, and she's trying to force it.
I do like her in the scene where they confront each other. I think she's good in that scene.
Yeah, she is good in that scene, and she's
the way
realistic.
She takes charge of it, the way, you know, the way she handles it. I like the way the character's written. I like the way Garner plays it. But I do agree that this character is missing something to make that final payoff land, to make you feel really great about the moment when she says, "I have a son."
That scene when she comes back and, you know, all is revealed is so bad. Can you imagine coming home and the guy comes upstairs from the basement with the 16-year-old.
A 16-year-old girl
and the
is
16-year-old is like crying, and she's like, Jennifer Garner's like, what's going on? And Bateman's like, everything's cool, right,
it's
Juno?
Hormones.
Like that's when you're like, okay, I want a divorce?
I want a divorce.
I want a divorce. Yeah.
There is no court in the country that would not believe that was cause for divorce.
Oh my God, it's bad. And it's like, it's honest. You would expect, if you were in that situation, you'd think way worse than what actually went down in the basement, which is really bad. But Jesus Christ, it looks so much worse in that context.
It looks so bad.
We should talk a little bit about some of the other random scenes that we'd like, or maybe not like so much.
We mentioned the ultrasound scene, Allison Janney's great scene in the movie. That's why you get Allison Janney in your movie. It's just so she can deliver a diatribe like that.
That was just such a straw man character, though, like a douchebag ultrasound.
Although supposedly based off a real experience Diablo Cody had.
Okay, fair enough. I could see an ultrasound technician being a little haughty toddy. What do you think of the soundtrack? You like the soundtrack?
It's fine. It doesn't have as much personality as some of these films do. I think because the music is less integrated, the only song that really ever sticks with me is the one from the ending, because the characters are performing it. But you compare it with something like Scorsese's work or Tarantino's, it's not even close. But even something like Garden State, where the music is so integrated into the characters' experiences, that soundtrack rings clearer in my memory than this one does. They're good songs.
I had a little comparison point. I think that this movie's cribbing a lot musically in the way that it's like deployed from the work of Wes Anderson, specifically Royal Tenenbaums. It's just a very similar style of music that's being utilized, like that 70s.
Except Anderson's taste in music is just better.
Well, his taste in music
sense
is
of
better.
what song to put where and how to pair it with the visuals.
He's also got a more diverse palette of songs that he uses like in conjunction with the movie. And he's not afraid to use like one of the Ramones songs when Royal and the kids are like running around the city. And like, I feel like this movie, every song almost sounds exactly the same. Even though Juno's talking about like Iggy and the Stooges and shit. And I'm like, where's your Iggy and the Stooges scene? Like every song, again, it's kind of like that corporate feel where they saw Garden State. They saw the most famous scenes of Royal
Hey, we can make
Tenenbaums.
a lot of money if we get a good soundtrack in there.
Yeah. And even something like Napoleon Dynamite, which opens with a White Stripes song that would be right at home in this movie. But then Napoleon Dynamite's not afraid to bust out like the Jamiroquai music with Napoleon dancing. Like, I just feel like this soundtrack, it's a good soundtrack. It's a good like CD, especially if you're in the mood for that kind of music. But it kind of interspersed throughout the film is just kind of the same thing over and over again.
The big thing that happens with a director like Scorsese or Wes Anderson is that they pick the song in the screenwriting process. They design the entire sequence around that music. I don't believe that happened here except for with that final shot. Maybe with the opening credits. I believe that they cut the movie and then they tried to find music that they could afford because the budget's small. Yeah. And they inserted where it made sense or where it fit, but it wasn't designed for those elements to work together in the same way that they do when you have someone who's really invested in that kind of filmmaking.
But it is a good soundtrack. I was listening to it. It's fun. It's great indie music. And no shame in liking that soundtrack. So, yeah, the high school drama is kind of shitty. This movie's way more about the other people. It's not about the high school experience at all.
It has like one observation about the high school experience, which is that like the jock is pining after Juno. And then it's sad when
the jock who is Spinner from Degrassi. I was so excited to see that dude. I was like, yeah, he's
there for like two jokes, two
it's
cutaways.
So it makes it so obvious that they made the movie in Canada, that they hired that kid from Degrassi. They like went to Canadian Central Casting and they're like, or I don't know if it was Spinner. I gotta look this up now because it's like
I'm not familiar with Degrassi, so I can't help you.
Spinner was the cooler kid than this guy. Oh, was he Sean?
I got some things.
Yeah, Sean. It was Sean. It was the guy who hooked up with Emma.
I got some fun facts about this movie or some other observations I want to talk about since there's just not that much plot to talk about. We're already basically done talking about the story.
Sure.
One, One of the things I really like about Reitman's direction in this film is he uses a lot of extreme close-ups that aren't of people's faces. This movie is a lot about observational details, which I find really interesting because it really speaks to the way Juno sees the world, I feel like, where the camera will focus in on one particular thing. Obviously, the most iconic example of this is when the boys run by in like the opening of the film, and we just get an extreme close-up of their crotch as they run by. But he does it with lots of little things throughout the movie, oftentimes when you wouldn't expect it. He won't show people's faces at all for practically an entire conversation, but will instead show objects that they're holding or something else in the room. It's a really interesting technique.
What was up with those kids running? Is that just like a fun little... I kind of like it. It's like a fun little thematic visual thing.
I mean, if you're in a small... I guess you're from the city, so I mean, that's what kids do in like a medium-sized town.
They just run around in their
on the cross-country team. Is they run for long distances, which often means past people's houses.
Got it. No, it was kind of a fun little detail, quirky, and it was on the cover of the movie. They like really sold this whole like, Michael Cera is in a track outfit. He is in Juno.
Quirky looks.
Look at his shorts.
I will say I do like it as punctuation in the final shot, which is this really long pullback, and you're kind of waiting for that last beat to just make it feel complete, and then they run across the screen. Cut to black.
Very cute. Yeah, I mean, I noticed that observation you had about the observational close-ups. Again, reminds me a little bit of Wes Anderson status. Like
it lacks the kind of like manufactured composition. It's much more naturalistic than Wes Anderson. You know, where if Anderson is going to call attention to a detail, he will isolate that detail and present it in a way that it exists outside of the verisimilitude of the scene. Yeah. He will create a whole tableau that explains that one object. This is a lot more like passing asides. Fun fact.
What's your fun fact?
My fun fact is the budget was very tight for this movie. They weren't sure how they were going to handle the changing seasons, which are really important because, you know, pregnancy takes a long time. They want to show the passage of time. And they lucked out, and there was a snowstorm in March in Vancouver, which was a little bit late for snow.
Oh, nice. Good.
And so all of the snow scenes were a lot of like the wide shots of the exterior of the snow were like all improvised and all done in 1 or 2 days. They were just like redid the whole schedule. And they're like, okay, now we're getting shots outside the Loring's house. Now we're getting shots on the track field. Quickly, get all these shots that we can in 2 days.
Yeah, it sells it really well. Usually when you see a movie that takes place with seasons over a year, they always skimp on one season. Yeah. In this case, they kind of skimped on summer, but that's okay.
They actually did get, like, they got some cherry blossoms. It looks pretty nice during that brief summer window that we see.
Oh, I just mean timing wise. They don't,
it's
right. Just an epilogue. But it
well,
makes
it's
sense.
Because, you know, 9 months.
Right.
You get 3 seasons.
Yeah. But yeah, the birth, I mean, it's a funny scene when she's like, either I just peed myself or I'm going into labor. Like, that's the great Diablo Cody screenwriting that I appreciate. Like, that's a great line.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's moving the plot along. It's not home-skillet. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
I find this stuff really moving for the Juno character when you see how profound this is for her, even though it, you know, she has been blasé about it. She's been sarcastic about it. This is still a difficult moment.
Juno is a good stand-in for like our generation. Like, she is us, basically. And I almost feel like Diablo Cody's like 10 years older than we are. Yeah. And I'm like, was Juno more at home in like 97 than 2007? She feels more
like a Gen X character to me.
Yeah. I don't know if she has the, she's not anxious enough to be.
No, not even close.
Of our generation.
She clearly doesn't have to deal with like the internet and the whole social structure that
and like the war on terror and 9/11. Like, she's got time to like just fucking move couches around and suck on a pipe. I don't know.
She's not worried about student debt and can't find a good job or can't buy a house.
That's why I think Superbad is the ultimate adolescent movie for us, because like those dudes are way more anxious than Juno is. They're anxious about everything, and it makes perfect sense. And it's funny because, you know, that movie was also written by people a little bit older than us, but they nailed it. That anxiety that you have when you're that age of like, I gotta get to the party. I gotta get with the girl. Oh my God. Like, and Juno,
the stakes are so fucking high for
Juno
me.
Doesn't
all
give
the time
shit.
They are.
Juno doesn't give a shit, but that's why we love Juno. You know, she's not necessarily a real 16-year-old. She's
what we wish we could be.
exactly.
We wish we could have such a life-changing event like getting pregnant and fly through it with as much charisma and grace as Juno.
Yeah, it's really, she says it herself. She's like, oh, I'll just plop it out. It'll be like nothing ever happened. That is pretty boss. Yeah, you mentioned that the birth is a big deal emotionally, and I totally agree with that. And you do get a little weepy when you see that shot of her like pushing, and then, you know, Jennifer Gardner being like, "There's my baby." But I stand by my mom's opinion that kid is going to become the next Norman Bates. So
that's also a nice moment because it you know, there's a lot of stuff, we've talked about this a few times, that because of the episodic nature of the plot, characters are dropped for long portions of times. Some characters' arcs feel either incomplete or forgotten. And there is a complete arc involving Allison Janney's character and her relationship with Juno, the conclusion of which is just the fact that she's there in the delivery room, right? At the start of the movie, they are antagonistic to each other. And over the course of a few scenes, the scene with the tech, and now this, it's clear that they have developed a much closer bond, that Juno has much more respect for her, that she has much more respect for Juno. And so that's the kind of elliptical storytelling or incomplete character arc storytelling that I think actually works.
And the same goes for J.K. Simmons. Like, they clearly get more emotionally connected by the end of the movie. Like, his final
scene with her is wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about the legacy.
This film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, and it was a sensation there. Roger Ebert said of the premiere, "I don't know when I've heard a standing ovation so loud, long, or warm." And I remember how much buzz. I thought this was a Sundance movie because that's usually where you hear this kind of thing. But this was just one of those movies that did so well on the festival circuit that it was already a known quantity by the time it came to theaters.
Gotcha. So
that became a real marketing strategy of the 2000s. I think Little Miss Sunshine is the one that perfects it, but this follows in those footsteps 100%.
Yeah.
Where it's like, here is the thing that everybody's talking about coming out of the festivals. Here's the thing that you have to see. It's going to get Oscar nominations. It's going to get buzz. You have to see this to be part of the conversation.
Yeah. And it did. It got nominated for tons of Oscars, like Best Picture, Best Actress.
Box office wise, the film had a budget of $7 million. Real small budget on this one. They get away with it mostly because Reitman and Cody are unknowns. Most of the actors are from TV or are young and are undervalued. The only big star, Jennifer Garner, takes a massive cut from her quote. Instead takes points on the film. Really good decision on her part.
Nice.
Yeah. It opened limited on December 7th to $413,000 and then goes wide on the 28th for Christmas weekend in 5th place to $10.6 million. Perfectly solid opening for an indie film with a limited rollout. It goes on to gross $143 million domestically. A huge hit.
How did it do that? It opened, so it just kept getting views all the way up to the Oscars?
A lot, and had an post-Oscar bump as well. But a lot of indie films have trajectories more like that, where it's about the staying power.
Got it.
You know, that's the classic My Big Fat Greek Wedding story, although nothing's ever done what that did, where it lasted for months and months and months and just made so much money.
I gotta watch that movie. That's so crazy, that story.
If we ever cover that year, we will talk about it in depth. But worldwide, it makes $231 million. It's a huge hit for everybody. Garner, it becomes her most profitable film ever, thanks to her contract, where she gets points on the film.
Nice.
Oh, let's talk about awards. It gets nominated for 4 Oscars: screenplay, picture, director, and actress.
Nice. Cleaning up.
And Cody wins for original screenplay.
Yeah, that's such a classic, like, best screenplay win where it doesn't get anything else. That was like Promising Young Woman this year.
Yeah. That often happens with an indie film that like hits big.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get a supporting actor win.
Right. But in this case, it was the screenplay.
I think it could have nominated some of the other performances. I expect I probably will by the time we get to the BttM Emmys.
But like you said, in terms of the legacy of the movie, for us personally, like, it kind of just stayed in 2007, right?
It really did.
And I that's kind of the sense I got from the people I talked to about this movie. They were like, yeah, I loved it when it came out. It was great. And then it seems like they haven't watched it in 10 years or whatever. Like, it just didn't have that, like, I gotta rewatch Juno now.
I think, like you said, maybe the hype was too big. Maybe the expectations were too high. And the film is good. It's charming. It's enjoyable. But it can't quite sustain those vaulted expectations.
What is your, like, go-to teen movie? Do you have one that you like a lot? I peg you for, like a John Hughes kind of person.
I love American Graffiti.
Oh, of course.
That's like a top 50 movie.
It's got to be a
me.
George Lucas teen movie.
That movie is so good, though. That movie is unbelievably good. And it just makes you sad for what happened to George Lucas's career when you watch that movie and you're like, God, I could have watched 10 more movies from this filmmaker who made this movie. Even though I love Stars.
I'll confess to you, I haven't really seen that movie. I've seen like clips of it, so I'll check it out because I bet I would like it a lot.
You would. It's so great.
I'm a big Fast Times at Ridgemont High person. They just released a Criterion disc of it, and I think that's the greatest teen movie ever made.
Better than Dazed and Confused? Because that's sort of where I thought you were going.
Yeah, better than
with
Dazed.
The Linklater of it all.
Way better than Dazed and Confused. I like Dazed and Confused, but Fast Times is an all-timer. It's funny, it's got emotion, it's rated R, it's the best.
I'll say for like a post 21st century, I was a big fan of Edge of 17.
I was too. I love that movie.
Very similar vibe to Juno, maybe a little bit less quirky.
Yeah,
a little
more awkward and angry, which is what I want out of my
awkward
movies.
And angry. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it does have a relationship that I need to re-examine though. Between, like I was saying earlier, like is any weirdo guy talking to a 16-year-old girl awkward? And like she has that relationship with Woody Harrelson in that movie where he's basically like her therapist, but I think that one like works her geography
because
teacher.
In every single one of those scenes he's like, I don't want to do this, get out of here, don't talk to me.
Yeah, it's still a little like I was watching the trailer after I watched Juno, and like he reads like the sexual message that she sends, and I feel like if I was that guy, I'd be like, I'm gonna give you your phone back now, and I'm gonna send you to the school therapist. This is beyond what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm down for a little lunchtime educational chat, but I don't want to see this phone. That's bad.
That one probably does need a re-examination.
Anyway,
all right. There's one other piece of legacy that we have to talk about. There was a thing that happened after this movie called the Juno effect. Where in 2008 and 2009, there was this inexplicable rash of teen pregnancies that were blamed on the film.
Wow.
This film became a major talking point as the cause of teen pregnancies.
I mean, what else was it? You know? What else could it have been?
Changes in social things, changes in the way that pregnancies are reported or discovered.
Was there less like sex ed going? Maybe it was like abstinence only
education. Increase in abstinence only education, perhaps.
Huh.
Who knows?
Interesting.
Almost certainly the film had absolutely nothing to do with it. It's like violence in video games. But I just think that's funny that was this film's legacy in the years immediately following that. And then, of course, it pissed off a lot of pro-choice people because they felt like the film was anti-abortion. I don't think that's necessarily true. You can certainly read that into it if you want to see it there, but I don't think you have to see it.
Yeah, I agree.
That option exists for her, and she chooses not to take it for her own reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a film about choice.
Yeah. All right, let's get into themes. Also, 2007 tech. This was kind of a non-tech 2000. It's trying to be all quirky. It's kind of like Waitress. Yeah. It clearly took place in 2007, but it had a definite lack of 2007-ness. That
the most iconic piece of tech in the movie, the hamburger phone, is literally something from Diablo Cody's childhood bedroom.
Which is, again, straight out of the
like
90s.
The 80s.
That's
90s.
like a 90s thing. So yeah, this movie doesn't get its own tech because it really couldn't care less about 2007. What other themes do you have?
All right, confession time. I watched this movie and then wrote these show notes in a post-second shot haze. So trying to think of themes was one of the hardest things about writing these show notes for me. I really only came up with one. I'm sure there are more. This movie is actually quite rich in subtext and thematic content, and I'm sure there are things that I missed. Hey, maybe email us if you've got one you think is a good one. The one that I came up with was kind of a new wrinkle on Quagmire, which we've talked about a lot. Post 9/11, war on terror, war in Iraq. People are feeling stuck, feeling in a malaise. And this is the idea of like the grinning and bearing it with the unwanted situation, the unexpected situation. And specifically unwanted pregnancies, which Nat already talked about being weirdly prevalent this year. In Knocked Up, in Waitress.
Yeah, hey, we didn't talk about with the Juno effect. There were 2 other movies about pregnancies. So it wasn't just Juno, you know?
Yeah.
I'm on the board here. I'm on the bandwagon. No, I know statistics are weird.
So I think that's a really interesting kind of twist on that, where it is about being stuck in a situation you didn't necessarily choose, but it's also about like accepting it in a way that a lot of the other films about Quagmire have been about fighting it.
I suppose. I guess my critique of this is that a pregnancy is always moving. Like, the central tenet of the Quagmire is that, like...
Isn't a war always moving, too?
You're stuck in a singular situation that doesn't change.
That's I see. When you say moving, you mean it's constantly changing. It's
yeah, it's you're always developing towards something. Like, there will be an end. There's an end in sight. Difference. Exactly. Yeah. So... I don't know, Ben. Talk to me in 2 weeks when the vaccine is fully revealed itself.
Hey, what are you bringing to the table? What things did you come up with?
Nothing. Hamburger phone. No, I think what I brought to the table is that like this movie doesn't really exist in 2007 like some of the other ones that we've talked about, even if they don't take place in 2007.
But because of Cody's very particular voice and drawing so heavily from her own experiences, the film feels like it takes place in a different time, is more concerned with things maybe from a different time.
It's concerned with its own voice more than anything else, and Juno's voice. And, you know, Cody's
Do you like how I took your laziness and made it sound like a really profound point?
Yeah, it may have been unnecessary. I think people got it the first time. You just repeated what I said. You just made it a little more essay. But whatever. What I was going to say is that... you know, Cody and Elliot Page and Jason Reitman created a character that is deserving of a movie that's just about the character. Like, it's more than enough to just have an hour and a half of hanging out with Juno. So I don't begrudge the movie for like not delving into like a deeper theme of whatever was going on in the world at the time, because it's just happy to be itself and it's happy to just be on its own terms. So I have complicated feelings about this movie. I'd say like it's a 3.5 star movie to me. Like I liked it. It was just a little too annoying.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. A little too annoying, a little bit too uneven. I think you can see Cody and Reitman's inexperience in a few points. They happen to get a really excellent cast who are all punching above their weight class.
For sure.
And that keeps it, you know, well above average, but still not great.
Yeah, this movie with a different cast is like dead in the water. Like bargain bin indie DVD for eternity. So
Lindsay Lohan and
no, not even Lindsay Lohan. Like some
like damn, like Mean Girls is around this time. Like
no man, if Lindsay Lohan got pregnant in a movie as a teenager in 2007, that would have been the biggest movie of the year. No, I'm talking like just some random actor that was
Emma
like
Stone then
from like School of Rock.
She's a good actress. She probably could have done it.
Some like School of Rock second fiddle kid is like now she's Juno and like and like you know what I mean. Just like it's dead in the water. No one remembers it, and it's got like a really badly photoshopped DVD cover.
Yeah.
So yeah, Juno. We're done. We talked about Juno. You're a part-time
John
lover
Lovitz
and a full-time
instead of
friend.
Or like God. Jim Belushi instead of J.K. Simmons.
Yeah, we can talk about it off the air.
No, you had a better finale, and then I ruined it because of the delay in the recording. You started singing the song. It was really cute and funny, but it popped up in my feed like 2 seconds after I started talking about fucking Jim Belushi. So.
Sorry. Technology sucks. Please follow us at BttM Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Email us, bttmpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Letterboxd, the amazing social media network that is based around movies. I can't think of a better reason to get on social media than to just learn and read about people's opinions on movies. I'm Nat McGee, and Ben is Hane101, but he never posts anything or logs anything. Please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on, I guess, Audible, wherever you can. And next week, we're going to be talking about another threequel. Another one. We've done
The threequels are back.
We've done 5 sequels. We've done 5 sequels with Harry Potter, Born, and then the 3 and the threequel Spectacular. But now we're doing Ocean's 13, the 3rd Ocean's movie. And that's it. You got anything else to say about Juno? Lickety split.
See, I was going to try and do one of the silly lines of dialogue, but the only one I could think of is home-skillet.
I wrote one to Jackie when I was texting her about it. I'll read it out to you. I said, sorry, home slate. Oh, she was complaining that there's only boys on this podcast, only male voices. And I said, sorry, home slice, but it's only XY chromosomes for this pod. Hope you enjoy sticking it in your ear holes once it drops on the Lord's Day. Catch you on the flip side, McMuffin.
Perfect.
What do you think of that?
Great. McGruff the crime dog approves.
For back to the movies, this has been Nat.
And I'm Ben, and we'll see you next week when we go back to the movies.
So I wanted to share, while we go on the outro, I want to share my fan theory about Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka is Charlie Bucket's father, and that everything was a test. He knew Charlie was in town. He put him out on the streets. I guess he had a one-night stand with the mom, and because they say that the dad is dead, or he faked his own death. He had a separate identity. He faked his own death, and he put Charlie through a series of tests, and the chocolate factory is just the final test, the whole life. What do you think of this?
Is he Grandpa Joe's son?
No, because Grandpa Joe is the mother's father.
Okay.
So he's the other.
That would make it even more pathetic.
The other grandpa is like an Eastern European guy, and I can totally see Wonka like shedding his Eastern European accent to make the factory.
That makes that movie way more fucked up.
Yeah.
And that movie's already really fucked up.
Charlie has to be like poor in order to take over the factory. He's got to go through this terrible life.
You're only worthy of my inheritance, child, if you pass a series of strenuous character tests, even though I abandoned you as a baby.
Exactly. Dude, I'm on to something. I'll talk about it more next week.
Great.
Okay.
Next outro.